with enough of these people. It's the people who work in pastoral care. It's the people who work at the things. And there are some great ones too. But it's not being led down. And this isn't just for me. I brought a document. Pope Francis actually wrote in one of his encyclicals called Temptations to Pastoral Workers. You should read this. I've never seen anything this good. I mean, he has a stumble, and he's talking about, and he means bishops, priests, deacons, pastoral workers, people that work for the church. He says they're more concerned about protecting their free time than they are, the gospel. That's what they're, I mean, I see this. In all the years I did, I almost never have deacons come to my things, ever. They're never there. And they need the Bible more than anybody else because they're preaching it. Okay? No, yeah, he's a deacon, right? Yeah, he knows. Yeah, you agree, right? Do you have any comments on that?
I agree with you.
Well, that's good. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go.
Other deacons are employed full-time, they have families, right? And others, are full-time at the parish. I don't know both sides. So.
Right. But, but on the other hand, I know deacons and their wives, some are really committed. I mean, because I've been invited to speak to them. I'm very impressed because that's a lot of work that they do. See, in fairness, they don't get enough training in it. They don't, because, when you go through the formation, there's so many things you have to learn. You didn't get a whole many courses on the Bible, did you? I guess it depends on your diocese.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
But, in my situation, the Diocese of Savannah, it's been 20 years since we had the diaconate class. And one was kind of put together almost like a self-help program, if you will.
Really?
Yes. And we went through that for 5 years formation. And now it's more sophisticated, and we're doing classes like every 2 years because the bishop for years did more deacons. And then we got a new bishop, and he said we can have a class, and I got in that class, and that was like 23 years ago. And then we have another bishop who really wanted deacons, and he said, I want a class starting every 2 years, and use St. Leo's is the university is used. Right. So it's we use Loyola, New Orleans. Right. And an extension program. So it's gotten a lot more in depth over the years.
And one of the things is the priests don't know what to do with deacons. We have that problem.
Oh no, I understand. But all this is leading up to, in 2010, Pope Benedict published a document called Verbum Domini. I know Joe's familiar with that. You're familiar with that, Joe, aren't you?
Somewhat. Not real strong.
Well, that's good. Has anybody else heard of this? Yeah. I mean, this is like a Magna Carta biblical studies. It's unbelievable. I mean, I brought some copies of some of what he said, and it relates to our talk, but they had a synod on the Bible in 2008, the Bible and the life of the mission of the church. And then they give all the results, they do all this preparation, they give all the results to the Pope, and then he's supposed to write an apostolic exhortation. Well, Germans are supposed to be on time, generally, and Pope Benedict wasn't. This was supposed to come out in like Lent of 2010. The Vatican even said it's going to come out, and it didn't. It didn't actually come out until September 30th, the Feast of St. Jerome. That's how he kind of weaseled out of it, because they can think he's doing it with St. Jerome. But he was late. Why he was late? Because he did it so detailed. It's unbelievably good. It is really. I mean, this is, and it's not filtered down. So my point is that this stuff is out there, and it's good to read it. And I'm going to just a little later comment. See. What did Pope Benedict talk about this passage? What does he say? And then Pope Benedict says if the church embraces Lectio Divina, it will bring a new spiritual springtime to the church. And people are doing it, but they're doing the reverential part. But the reason part, for various reasons, is falling behind. Everybody has to decide where they want to be on that, okay? Because some people can handle it, some people can't. But that's where we are. So anyways, that's all the background to now what we're going to do about John. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Don.
Just going back a bit, the fundamentalists, and so how do the fundamentalists deal with the supernatural?
Well, you know what, Yeah, they probably think I want to be careful because I don't want to make it seem like I'm making light of it. They probably think everything is supernatural, so to speak. And you know what? This is interesting. That's a good question because the Gospel of John battles these kind of issues. Since you brought that up, the Gospel of John was written 90 to 100 AD. And probably at Ephesus. And by the way, how many people here have what they feel is a strong Marian devotion?
I have the devotion, just not the effort.
It's not the what?
Not the effort.
Yeah, welcome to the clan of men. You know? It's good in the head, but sometimes not in the heart. The reason I say that is who took care of the Blessed Mother?
No.
Right. All right. But it really wasn't John. Who was it? What was he described as? Anderson knows it. And they didn't call him John. Right, the beloved disciple. Yeah. And they didn't call her Mary either, did they? They called her what?
Blessed Mother.
The mother of Jesus. See, so what I'm saying is that John, the beloved disciple, had this, it's the fruit, his gospel is the fruit of a long reflection on this stuff. And I think we want to give credence to the fact that the Blessed Mother had something to do with it. It's funny, when I read these commentaries, they don't say that. But I think it's really, it's hard to imagine anybody knowing her better than, knowing Jesus better than her. Literally, and, along with St. Joseph. But I think that that's really, that those two, and that she probably, and we're going to see that she didn't get Jesus right away. They had the Annunciation of Mary and to Joseph, but they're still human. It took them a while to understand all this stuff. So, back to what Doug is saying, the Gospel of John was bringing in these Greek concepts. We're going to see them in the passage today. He's bringing in these Greek concepts. And he's merging it with Judaism. And then with his own thing. And the Gospel of John, by the way, what's the fundamental teaching? What's really the only command that Jesus gives? There's only one moral command in the whole Gospel of John. What is it?
Love God and love your neighbor.
What?
Love God and love your neighbor.
Well, that's good. You're a synoptic person. That's in the synoptics. That's right. No, but what you know this, Ray? That she's right. But what more specifically? What does Jesus say at the Last Supper? Doug's going to trump her. What he says? This is my command: you love one another. See, there's a difference. See, John is the gospel of fraternal charity. You have to really get that. John is the gospel of fraternal charity. It's absolutely important that we understand that. It's the gospel of love the church. And that's why, the sad thing is a lot of times people take it to use it against the church. And I think that's a fundamentalist thing. They take these verses out of context. You're really missing it. So, and I'm going to recommend some books that some of these guys, Johannine scholars, have written. One of the things that they say is that John was reacting a little bit to what had happened in the early church. And it's happened in Catholicism too. People became, we have Mark's gospel, which was probably written in Rome. It was written to people who were being persecuted. Mark is the gospel for catechumens. It's a gospel, it's a baptismal gospel. It gets people who were pagan or Gentile and shows them the gospel. And that's why it has a lot of stories. That word immediately, Father Edgar always talks about in his homily. That word is there throughout. Jesus would have a heart attack because he's doing everything really quick. But it was in the gospel today, so it's not just there. But Mark's gospel is the catechumenate gospel. It's baptismal preparation. There's not much teaching in it, but it's really getting people to embrace the cross, the core of his message. And the reason I want to inspire you to get into this, because the ending of the Gospel of John, the original ending of John's Gospel, doesn't have really a resurrection appearance. It has an announcement, but the women are told to go announce it to the apostles that Jesus is risen, and they're afraid, and they don't do it. But then what happened is those verses 9 to 20, that was added on later because that Mark's ending apparently didn't give them enough. If you just read Mark 16 one day, that's the original ending of Mark. Everybody who knows the study of the text will agree. Mark's gospel originally ended at verse 8. Then we have this verse 9 to 20, and if you read that, it's like an amalgamation of Matthew and Luke. So read that. If you read a commentary, it's going to show you how they're taking parts of Matthew and Luke. So, and you'll see this in the notes. It's just important to understand this. And but there's good Markan scholars will say there's a reason maybe Mark ended it there. You know, some people say, did they lose it? Did they lose the original ending? Who knows? We don't know. And that's the other thing I want to point out is the Bible is not perfect in the sense that we look at perfect. And we're going to see in John's gospel, there's the concept. The biblical concept of perfect is different than ours. When Jesus says you must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, it means you must reach the goal. That's what it means. You reach the goal. There's a Greek word, teleos. You reach the goal. And we see this in Hebrews, and it says when Jesus was perfected in suffering. It's not linear perfection. It means you've reached the goal. Christian maturity, you've reached the end. And what's the last thing that Jesus says in John's gospel when he's on the cross? Do you remember? It is finished. And it's a derivation of that word, tetelestai. It is finished. So that is that's something we're going to do with John. So we have Mark being the baptismal gospel, and then we have Matthew and Luke. Matthew is the the catechetical, all the teachings, and it was written probably in Antioch by Matthew, who's probably a converted rabbi, and it's bridging Judaism to Christianity, and it has the most intense moral teaching in the whole New Testament, and it's dealing with church relations, like chapter 18 of Matthew. There's a book by the scholar I'm going to talk about later. Just on that chapter, it's unbelievable how good it is. I mean, you read Matthew chapter 18, and in fact, it ends with the parable of unlimited forgiveness, the unjust steward. So Matthew says the final word on church discipline is forgiveness, and we need to learn that. So Matthew is dealing with church relations. It's dealing with this Judaism coming to Christianity. Luke is dealing with the world. He's writing to Gentiles. He's a doctor. He's dealing with, how does Christianity work in the Gentile world now? And so Luke and Matthew both are at this catechetical level. But now we have John coming in. John's later. And John, in fact, you guys are all, I'm going to use, if they have a thing here, you guys, I've got a new name for you guys. If you're here on a Saturday morning, you guys are John is the gospel for presbyters. And I'm going to just read some comments of this because I think it'll make you laugh a little bit. John, and you're going to see this, John is not a gospel for beginners. So you do not want to start with the gospel of John. John presumes somebody who is serious about the faith and who is going on that path to perfection. He presumes that. He presumes the Gnostic, not in the pagan sense, Gnostic meaning knowledge. He presumes somebody who is going deeper, who is like St. Paul, who is really trying to go deeper. John, because he became so close to Jesus, he's writing to help people come close to Jesus. And when I was preparing for this was very helpful. I said, I really need to get back into the Gospel of John, because it's so easy, and we think that this might be some of his motivations. It's so easy to get hung up in all the ritual and the devotions and the dogma and the rigmarole of the church, and that personal relationship with Jesus, that intimacy, kind of falls away. So, and that's kind of the theme of John. We're going to talk about it. So there's a saying that a child can wade into the Gospel of John and an elephant can drown. So even though it's not a gospel for beginners, we can embrace it. But man, when it gets really deep. Now I'm going to just diverge 1 second, and because this is something I brought with me, but and I never knew this scholar who I'm going to talk about, John does not have the institution there. He doesn't have the institution of the Eucharist, correct? Did you know that? There's no, this is my body, it's not in John's Gospel. It's not there. We have the bread of life discourse, okay? Now, we just had this Eucharistic, revival. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing I was a little disturbed about is when we read chapter 6 of John over the summer, it is a Eucharistic chapter, but not just Eucharistic. It also talks about Jesus as the revelation of God. So it really brings together the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. It's only verses 51 through 58 of John 6 that's specifically only the Eucharist. There's overtones in the breaking, the feeding of the multitude, and all. It's permeated. But there's another part. It's Jesus' revelation. That's what John's basic message is. Jesus is here to reveal us, to reveal God. That's what he's trying to do. He is showing us the Father. That's what and that's why we have to understand that we need him. All the Gospels, we need all the Gospels, because we need Mark to remind us about discipleship. We need Matthew for the teaching. We need Luke for the pastoral care. Now, I'm exaggerating because they're in all the Gospels. But we need John for this embracing of closeness, and also for getting that message. God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that whoever believes in him may not die but have eternal life. So John's the Gospel in which we really encounter Jesus. That's why we encounter them. So that's what when we're going to do this together. And then I think what I'm going to do is we're going to do this together, and then I'm going to give you some of this scholar's insights, because it's way beyond my pay grade. I mean, I was reading it, but I will just tell you that I was starting on this to really help me about, okay, we don't have the Eucharistic institution in John, but we do have the Bread of Life discourse, which happened in Capernaum in a synagogue. It was like a homily. It's really interesting. Why did John put it there? We don't know, but and it's very powerful. But when John says, "Who eats my flesh and drinks my blood," those are very Eucharistic words. I mean, those are words that are very similar to what is in Luke's Gospel. So it's, John is really, he's putting the Eucharist in context. And he's putting the Eucharist in context of the rest of Jesus' teaching. And the danger is people can go to the Eucharist and think, all I got to do is receive communion. I can do whatever I want, and that's it. I'll just go to communion, and I don't really need to pay attention to the Bible. I don't, fraternal charity, it's me and God. John doesn't buy that. But this, and I brought this, I have like an advanced thing for some people who are interested. The foot washing is what John has instead, okay? And people say that is what John's version of the Synoptics. But one scholar says, no, it's the love command. And it's really interesting. John, what John's saying is the Eucharist is the sacrament of love. And it really is. So if I go and I'm upset at the priest, or I'm upset at parishioners or family members or friends or anything, and I'm at the Eucharist, I better get my attitude, put the Hail Marys on hold for a second and deal with this, because it's the sacrament of Christian unity and the sacrament of love. And Jesus twice gives that command, love one another as I have loved you. And that's why these Johannine scholars, when they read this in the language, they'll tell you how much this is an influence. Here's the better part, and this is why I'm going to eventually talk to why we need to read the best guys. Bishop Barron isn't a best guy biblically, but he's great. I highly 100% recommend him, but he's a theologian. But he's a biblical scholar, but he's not the highest level, because that's not his field, but he's great. The foot washing, this guy says, wait a minute, why did John when does the foot washing occur?
Last Supper.
When at the Last Supper? What part? Pardon? During the meal, right? When would the slave normally wash the feet of the people? Exactly, when they arrive. But John has it when they're in the middle of the meal. So, this guy who's doing it, I'll explain to you, this is like way beyond my pay grade. And he's given all these reasons. And the reason it's important to understand this stuff is he does it right in the middle of the meal. Because for John, the main message there is not just that we should wash each other's feet, which it is, that's part of it. But he's showing Jesus doing a symbolic action. He's showing Jesus in a prophetic thing, because we don't have, he said if this was something that Jesus normally did, it would be different, but it isn't. We don't have any other examples of Jesus washing feet like this. I mean, he's the master. But this is a prophetic self-identity thing of showing, John is revealing, this is who Jesus is. He's come to reveal to the Father to us. So while we have to practice this and showing love to each other, we have to first see that this is Jesus revealing the Father to us. This is what God's about. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm in my own spirituality, I'm often battling with God. You know, like I've written 3 books on Job, and I'm always like fighting with God, getting angry with God, and saying these things that I could get in trouble with, and you know, just really, it's just my nature, and I just get frustrated. And then I read John, and then I think, you know, God's on your side. God's on your side. And this is why I brought these books to these people. When you're exposed to the best, when you read these people, and they're really good. They're not like popularizers. They're not people that you ever hear about, because they're really truth oriented. This Old Testament scholar who I mentioned, who took a liking to me, he has a book on the Old Testament, and in Job's chapter 42 we have this story of the hippopotamus and the alligator, the crocodile, where God is talking about how he's mastered them and so forth. And why is he doing this? You know, that's his answer to Job. Is he's showing him? He first shows him how God's in charge of nature. Then he shows him Behemoth and Leviathan. So these scholars, where is he? You know, what does Job mean with this? So the one scholar who I'm going to talk about said they stand for Mesopotamia. It's historical. Mesopotamia and Egypt. Okay, the crocodile with Egypt, and Behemoth, or the hippopotamus, with Mesopotamia, because those two countries at various times ruled things, and Israel was always having to deal with them, and they were always afraid, and they were afraid of them, and they thought that Mesopotamia and Egypt could destroy the whole world. So that's one interpretation of that, is that God is in charge even of these historical nations that could destroy the whole world. But the other part is those are also primordial creatures, like in Genesis, and there are other parts of the Old Testament. So they stand for these cosmic forces that are opposed to God. Okay, Behemoth and Leviathan. So God somehow has control of them. God, you know, God can rule over them. God's not afraid of them. And then what this guy, I've written 3 books on Job, gave talks on all over the world on this, and then he says, and the point there is God is saying